Pros, save more on the materials you need to get the job done inside and out at Lowe's. Right now, get 10% off in-stock Trex Naturals decking, now available in more styles. Plus, get 15% off select custom entry, interior, and storm doors. Then, we'll deliver it all straight to your job site to help keep your jobs moving. Get the brands pros trust, priced right, and ready when you need them. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 5/27. While supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Hello, I'm Kelly Sadler, the commentary editor at The Washington Times, and this is Politically Unstable. Today, we are featuring Anna Giaritelli. She is a reporter at The Washington Examiner and author of a new book called Under Assault, My Story as a D.C. Crime Victim. And we're going to be talking about D.C. crime and what's happened recently. Recently, 13 officers of the DC police unit were put on administrative leave because they were found to be manipulating the crime data to make it look like crime in Washington, D.C. wasn't as prevalent as it really is. And these were stats that the mainstream media glommed onto when President Trump decided to send in the National Guard to straighten out Washington, D.C. You had fact checkers, you had everyone running to the D.C. police saying, crime isn't a big deal, is it? And they were like, no, it's not. Look at the statistics. They're all down. And the president accused the police of manipulating the data. And that was found to be true. But Anna, you've got a personal connection to this story. You went through it yourself. Can you tell our viewers exactly of your experience?
Yeah, thanks so much, Kelly. The crime cover-up by DC police goes bigger than this incident. My crime as a sexual assault survivor was excluded from the crime stats on a different condition. I was attacked in the street randomly in 2020, not far from the U.S. Capitol, and by just a deranged man who got away that day. And he was later arrested thanks to DNA from the assault. And he was already a criminal, had a criminal record, and he was put before a judge and released the following day. And it took about 2 years before we ended up going to trial, and he was sentenced. And in that time, he was arrested 5 more times and then released by the judge the following day. And so I lost faith in the DC police and the judicial system, that they were going to actually look out for me as a victim. This attack happened right outside a block from my front door. And so I left DC, and he went to prison. He was convicted for sexual abuse in the 3rd degree. And when I went to look for my crime stat on the DC police stats page, I couldn't find it, and found out after reaching out to police that they do not include crimes, felonies that were not 1st degree as of 2020. And when I asked them last year where that stood, they said they're no longer including stats that were not sexual abuse cases that were not 1st degree and some 2nd degree. And so it opened my eyes as a federal law enforcement reporter to how the stats were being covered up, and in a whole separate way, like I said, than this other way that they had been covered up by these 13 other high-ranking officers.
Now, what astounds me is that you got sexually assaulted right outside your home by a deranged lunatic. The police had him in custody. He went before a judge, and the judge released him back into the city. On what grounds? And why was that? Why wasn't he just put away almost immediately, or just put away until, the trial date happened and he was found either innocent or guilty?
It was because the jail was too full. And so that was the grounds. The U.S. Attorney's Office prosecuted my case because in D.C., we don't have district attorneys. All felonies get prosecuted by DOJ, which is a huge deal. And that was what they told me. The jail was full. There's nowhere to put him. So we put him back on the streets. And I don't have a say in that. It's not under my control to say you can't let that happen. I mean, I did, but they sort of shrugged their shoulders and said, well, this is how it is. And what I didn't know, Kelly, was that prior to assaulting me And I was rescued. The assault didn't stop. It was because people actually heard me screaming on the sidewalk and ran over and got him off me. He ran away. He had assaulted another woman in the same area, a woman who was an off-duty police officer, and she had survived as well. And I didn't find that out till sentencing. And so after this, he gets arrested 5 more times, including for violating restraining order, coming back to the site of the crime outside my apartment, exposing his genitals to a staff member at the Supreme Court a few blocks away. He was caught outside with a machete, on and on. And those cases, none of them are included in the crime stats. And all of these were preventable. None of this needed to continue to happen.
Well, you said you had to move out of the area. I can only imagine going through an experience like you did and knowing your assailant is back out on the streets and having to live in the city in constant fear. Emotionally, that'd be very difficult to deal with.
It was. It was several weeks into COVID when this happened in DC. The lockdowns were brutal. I lived by myself 6 floors up and just didn't see anybody. And the only chance I had to leave, couldn't go to church, couldn't go to work, couldn't go out to restaurants, was to go on a walk every day. And that solitude made it so much more difficult. But ultimately I said, I have to move. So I moved across town to a different area, but was unable to shake just the fear of, I don't remember his face. So every time I go out, I'm looking at, unfortunately, every Black man in sweatpants and scared that, is that him? Is he going to attack me again? Does he remember me? And dealing with, severe PTSD, a lot of anxiety, constant panic attacks. I was in a place for a number of months afterwards where I probably should have been hospitalized, but I just refused to acknowledge how bad my mental health was. And ultimately in 2021, after January 6th, and the inauguration and what the state that DC was in, I said, I can't be in DC anymore. And so I left DC and moved to Texas to be near family as I recovered.
What made you move back to the city?
I didn't. I ended up moving after I was in Georgia. I was in Texas for 3 years with family, my nephews and brother and sister-in-law. And it was overlapping with the Biden administration and covering Homeland Security.
Border.
I happened to be in Texas near the border at the perfect time. And so, that did make my recovery mentally and emotionally more difficult, covering such a difficult topic for years, but I was able to recover. And after the President Biden was getting ready to leave office, I said, Texas has been great, but it's not where I want to call home. And so I knew I couldn't go back to DC. I still travel to DC once in a while for work, but I try to get out of DC as soon as possible because I just don't feel good there. And I moved to Georgia.
Well, weather's nicer in Georgia.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing here. It's the worst thing that happened to me truly has led to the best outcome. And that's one of my messages for survivors is, the unthinkable doesn't have to ruin your life. There is a recovery possible.
And how do you feel about the president's initiative to use the National Guard within Washington, D.C. to clean up the city? He's got to make D.C. beautiful again. Group that are basically opening up water fountains for the first time in decades, getting vagrants off the streets, out of our parks. He's gotten a lot of backlash from the left for doing that, saying that it's not necessary. I live in the city and I see the results of it, and I think it's wonderful what he's doing. But what are your thoughts on President Trump getting back into the White House and making DC beautiful again a priority?
Yeah, I take off my reporter hat and put on my human hat, right? I absolutely support what he's doing. And when he made that announcement last August that he was going to address crime in DC, I wasn't covering it as a reporter. I was covering something else that day, but I tuned in to watch it. And I was crying uncontrollably because here was someone who was doing something for victims and non-victims, people like yourself who live in DC for the first time. The mayor is in her third term and she hasn't done anything on crime, anything that's had any actual results. And we've continued to see crime as an issue in DC even this past weekend. And so I was relieved to see him doing something, but I was also really disturbed that the crime stats, he has said are going down. I have no doubt they are in fact going down. They've made thousands of arrests in DC since last August, but the DC police are continuing to give him stats that are false, that are blatantly lying. I'm not counted. How many others are not counted? And so until we know the full extent of that, we can't actually address crime, not just in DC, but how many other cities where they want to say they're safe, but we know have crime problems, specifically places like Chicago, are cooking the books to make it look a lot safer than they are.
It's definitely happening at a national level in a lot of these major metropolitan areas. It's not just a DC specific problem. But how did you approach the news when it was reported that 13 officers were put on administrative leave because they were found guilty of cooking the books? I mean, that is some sort of accountability, no?
It is. And they were covering crimes up. What they were doing is going to crime scenes and saying, okay, this was a robbery at gunpoint. We're going to charge them with theft, which is a different offense. So downgrading crimes in that way. And I don't believe my crime was downgraded that way. My assault was prior to that pattern that began. Mine was just simply excluded like many other felonies because it's not a first degree or a top second degree crime.
What is a first degree and second degree crime? Because it seems like sexual assault should be a first degree crime to me. That's blowing my mind.
Yeah. So sexual assault in the first degree would be completed rape. Mm-hmm. Second degree would be other levels of attempted rape. Third degree, also attempted rape. I wasn't raped, but I was in the process of what I believe was going there. And I fought for my life that day. And these are the questions we don't know why I was attacked and what his goal was. But given that he'd previously attacked another woman, the U.S. Attorney's Office was very confident that it was going that direction. And so there's those varying degrees. And so there's going to be a lot more of second and third degree sexual assaults in any place than there are first degree. And so as of last August, when I wrote an op-ed for the Washington Examiner coming out with my assault story, and I accused the DC police publicly of covering up crime, it showed that on the map, on the DC crime stats, there were 53 sexual assaults in the city for the past year. And I laughed when I saw that because it is so absurd. 53 is horrific. That's terrible. But how many are there actually? How many women like myself have been attacked? Sexual assault happens in so many different types of circumstances and is the most underreported crime. And so to say that there was only 53, I mean, it's an insult to women. It's such a disregard for women of all people. And I think that's what makes it even more personal. Mm-hmm.
What needs to be done? How would you like to see the system reformed?
We're going to see the system reformed. I've just decided I'm not going to fight for no reason. I want to see crime stats fully reported, not just in DC, but in major U.S. cities so that the public has an actual true understanding of, hey, where are 911 calls coming in? What is being charged? Did it get pled down? What was the ultimate conviction? That sort of thing. And so just 2 weeks ago, I launched a change.org petition on a whim. And the amount of support from people has been so humbling. We've had 14,000 signatures so far, and the petition has been endorsed by the National Association of Police Organizations and the National Police Association. So two major police groups nationwide say, you know what, we support this. It is time for all these large police departments to get on board and give the FBI accurate stats every year and give the public accurate stats. And, also for the sake of police, the cops on the ground, they're doing the work and they're seeing their arrests not count. So it's unfair to them, it's unfair to the public, and it's unfair to victims like myself.
Now, where can our viewers go to sign on to your petition? And how has it been received? You said the major police organizations and unions have signed on to it, but how is it being received at the city level? Let's say within DC or within Chicago, within LA. Are you seeing any movement within those police departments to kind of clean this up?
Yeah, the website's really simple. It's change.org/crime-stat-cover-up, all one word. And that'll take you right to the petition, and it takes 30 seconds to create an account and sign it. And then you can share it as well, because how many of us aren't concerned about public safety? It's such a major issue. I spoke with Tom Homan yesterday. I interviewed him at the White House, and Mr. Homan said, your case is the one leading the charge in DC for the White House and U.S. Attorney Judge Jeanine Pirro to do more on this topic. And so we're seeing support from the White House and DC and learning that the crime stat cover-up is limited to those 13 officers. But I haven't seen or heard anything from Washington, D.C. officials, Chicago, L.A., any of them. And I think that's why we need the petition, because these people are not going to change policies. They're not going to say, oops, we didn't realize we weren't covering up crime stats, or we were doing it on purpose, until the public gets involved and forces their hand. So I think that's the power of democracy. We get to actually say, this isn't working for us. You need to make policies that the public wants.
What do you think? And I'm struggling here. What do you think the motivation is to cover up these crime stats? Because people who live in the city experience the crime. They see it with their own two eyes. They know it's a problem. Before Trump came into office, I was afraid to go out in the city after 10 p.m. when it was dark because of the amount of bums that were on the streets. Why do some of these politicians, think it benefits them to cover up the crime or to pretend that it isn't as major as it really is when people see and experience it themselves? It's not like it's tied to any funding. Is it just trying to alter public perception? I don't understand.
I can't speak to each politician and why, but I do think it is tied to public perception, specifically in DC, because if you are the president's backyard and lawmakers do have some authority over your funding and what's going on in DC, you can't let the nation's capital look like absolutely out of control. So you can have some crime, but you need to really tailor it, make sure it's looking okay, because that is a reflection of the president. And if the president can't reflect his backyard, that doesn't look good. And so I think that's where you see police doing it in DC. But, crime overall, I assume it's just to cover up and make things look better. But that's what I would love to ask those mayors, those police chiefs, why are they doing this? And I think, like you said, you and I, when you're a victim, you don't know all the other victims. I don't know how widespread crime is. And so you just think, oh, I'm one of the stats. It's crime's bad, but everybody knows it. And in a way, it doesn't matter if it's bigger than it actually is, because it's already a known problem. So it's like a non-issue in that sense, but the numbers really do matter.
In order to solve a problem, you got to be able to confront a problem honestly and define it honestly. And the fact that it's not being defined honestly is in itself a problem. So I'm glad that you're bringing attention to this, that you've got your change.org petition, that the police organizations have signed on to it. Because, this isn't a partisan issue. This is Democrats, Republicans. Everyone should agree. Everyone wants safe streets to live in and wants safe neighborhoods. And so this is something that should be bipartisan, and that we should be able to confront honestly and solve. I'm encouraged by President Trump's actions. There's going to be another surge in National Guard, I suppose, this summer. Crime is still a problem in Washington, D.C., as we saw, as you referenced this weekend, with the Chipotle in Navy Yard getting ransacked by teens and teenagers. But Judge Jeanine Pirro is looking into that, looking into youth crime particularly. But, there's a lot of work yet to be done.
Yeah. And Mr. Homan shared with me yesterday that he's met with Judge Jeanine Pirro, and she is working on stuff. I think that's the most frustrating thing as a victim. You don't see what's going on behind the scenes, but he really reassured me that things are in the works. This is unacceptable. And, continue speaking out, continue talking about the change.org petition and building that support, because ultimately that's what's going to change things.
Anna Giaritelli, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kelly.